Welcome to Stupid Builds, where I will show you some stupid builds. Some of these builds are our own creations, some are from our live stream chat, but all of them are stupid because of how strong they secretly are. Before we begin, I must offer a trigger warning. If you have spent more time on the Destiny Reddit than you have interacting with another person face to face, then I advise you click away, lest your blood pressure rise and fill the room with a distinct stench of stale Cheetos. I have fallen in love with the Verglass Curve this season. While I know it won't offer the twat-smacking DPS that gets pointlessly argued about on Twitter, what it does offer, in particular with this Hunter and Warlock build I will show you, is a near one-size-fits-all utility and area control many weapons can only dream of. The Verglass grants hip-fired shots after kills stasis arrows, which freeze targets on direct hits, or stasis crystals on impact with surfaces. While bows are not the greatest for overall damage, stasis crystals are like dwarfed nukes wrapped in the body of an overgrown snow cone. Verglass dispenses these ice cube czar bombs like a malfunctioning McDonald's drink dispenser. You are, with minimal effort, able to fill the room with more stasis crystals than Guardian Con packs in virgins. Besides the pure area of effect these crystal explosions provide, they of course also freeze and shatter targets, offering us an easy utility for adding Champion's Guts to the room's color palette. Many of you already know where we're going with this next segment, artifact mods. Pillar of Ice grants our build even more stasis crystals, allowing the number of crystals present in a room to quickly exceed the number of unfortunately fleshy bodies filling it. But let's not rest there. Dragon's Bite gives us a chance to instantly freeze targets, assuming we rend their shields with either a strand or stasis weapon. Some of you may have missed a crucial detail here, a very devious detail. Verglass Curve's crystals are considered part of the weapon's damage. This subtle detail allows us to use the stasis crystals we create from our bow to trigger weapon-exclusive perks such as, you guessed it, Dragon's Bite. But this small detail doesn't stop here, oh no! Any perks we add onto our build, which we are normally incapable of proccing from our abilities, such as the Glacier Grenade, will work with Verglass. This includes our own weapons crystal generating more perk stacks. In other words, yo dog, I heard you like stasis crystals, so I put stasis crystals that generate from your own stasis crystals so you can fire stasis crystals while standing on a stasis crystal while creating more stasis crystals. And yes, of course, in our last artifact mod column, we run the perk Hail of Storm, which causes an X-pattern shape of slowing and damage upon shattering stasis crystals. And before someone leaves the comment, I will beat you to the punch. Take a shot for every time I say stasis crystal. Unless you can hold your liquor like a semi-truck, I think we might have just offed our entire audience. Apologies. For our Hunter build, the build creator had us pair this with the Frosties so that we could generate our abilities more frequently. Unfortunately, these didn't work too well for our given activity. In fact, thinking about it, I can't think of many situations where Frosties work well in PvE compared to other exotic options. Much more of a PvP exotic, no? This we all wrap together with the Shadow Dive aspect, because of course, and the Touch of Winter aspect for some free anabolic steroids for our Glacial Grenade. For aspects, run this with chains, shards, fissures, and hedrons. Our secondary originally ran a fusion rifle, but like fortunate Darwinian circumstances, we were forced to use a sidearm to deal with barrier champions, which ended up being a very solid option. This build was good, but lacked a certain momentum. It was like watching a hamster roll down a flight of stairs. It got there eventually, but it took a beating and made a lot of noise. The Warlock build that has been playing in the background, however, was like a much more refined version of this build, and gave our terminal hamster a much-needed ball of protection and speed. Similar setup with the Verglass and the fragments, but this time we ran this with Ice Flare bolts for freeze chaining, and Grim Harvest for that slight bump up in ability uptime and potential survivability if we ran with Fragment's Whisper of Rhyme. The difference in exotic armor is what set this build apart from the others. If your memory is better than that of a goldfish, you will remember about the Verglass Curve's crystals proccing weapon-based perks. Well, we are going to abuse that and run it with the Mantle of Battle Harmony. Mantle will grant us bonus weapon damage off of mashing subclass weapon kills, so our icy blender of death got even more lethal. Perfection. 2 ice strains out of 3 Stone Cold Steve Austins. Part of our New Year's resolution was to plant a micro speaker into your phone and make it play Baby Shark on a 10-hour loop to anyone who doesn't subscribe. Make a New Year's resolution yourself and give that button a click, for your sanity's sake. Risk Runner is a very useful exotic in PvE, but in PvP, oftentimes it feels more useful to try and beat someone to death with a pineapple on a string, or maybe just hurl insults at them until they quit. This is old news, so imagine my surprise when I begrudgingly slapped together this amalgamation of a build from a super chatter and found myself wanting, nay, demanding that I play it more. Perhaps even more surprising is that this build came packaged in with a Stasis Titan, the unloved red-headed stepchild of the otherwise decently balanced subclass sandbox. The real ticket to success here was running the behemoth with the Cryoclasm aspect and the Peacekeeper's exotic, so that our slides go from leaving a dirty skid mark on the pavement to having a length long enough to paint a Van Gogh. Titans, this is the closest you will ever be to having blink. A sheer distance my ass was able to skid across with this setup was only matched by John Bungie writing his 2 cents about the layoffs. My dump truck metal Titan ass was careening into enemy territory like a rip-off Eurobeat montage in the Vietnam War. I mean, are you seeing the absolute and utter absurdity I am performing? It's like I somehow turned Destiny into Forza with space guns! Are you getting what I'm telling you? This build was awesome! I am by no means a Titan main. My IQ is above double digits. But hot damn does this make me question my choices. Was the Risk Runner ideal? Far from it. In fact, I would substitute this electric Nerf gun for almost any other SMG, but it had some kind of perfect chaotic energy to match its complete lack of self-preservation instincts. This build straps to us like a lit rocket. A genuine philosophical question for you at home now standing on the other side of this caffeine-fueled chaotic rant. Does a build that simply asks you to go fast really care about anything else in the kit? Do we really need to have any other stat or perk if we are moving too fast for our enemies to even perceive us? Is going fast the secret to world peace? Timestamp this segment of the video with your answer, but explain nothing as to confuse the non-believers. 3 DeLoreans out of 2 Barry Allens. Okay, so I've saved this build till now because on paper it shouldn't work, in practice it shouldn't work, but by some twist of destiny, kill me, it did work. This build is a Frankenstein of 2 builds from our chat, both of which wanted to lean in heavy on our melees to therapeutically process the trauma left over from either your mother's chocolates or your father's belt with exposure therapy. In order to accomplish this, the build creator told me to, get this, not fire my weapon. I assumed at this point that I would not be including it in this video because no person ever in their right minds looks at the metric shite ton of weapons in Destiny and says to themselves, no thanks, I will take a knife to this intergalactic gunfight. Yet here we are. The build centered around the Ophidius Bathe, the recently buffed exotic hunter chess piece that grants a double charge of throwing knives and kills with said throwing knives a temporary escalating buff. On the one hand, I think the Ophidius has a real shot at finding a home in the sandbox. Despite the buff window being very small, it promises some rather humorous rewards. But on the other hand, I think one knife is generally enough to solve all of a hunter's problems. Obviously, being forced to never fire a weapon outside of my glaive, thankfully, is never going to be an optimal strategy, but I will be damned if it wasn't viable. I think the success of this build was largely due to our map choice. Twilight Gap is like a blender filled with parkour and razor blades. But in and amongst the chaos, our stab first and ask questions second strategy worked wonders. Part of this kit, which ended up being a cruel joke, was the Monte Carlo. Of course it's the Monte Carlo. What other exotic could a melee build possibly run? Anyways, the Monte would have been a fantastic asset into making our already clearly walking PSA for never running with scissors into a self-sustaining knife factory, but obviously this was just a carrot on the stick for our play session. If hearing me bellyache about my lot in life being forced to never enjoy the sweet sounds of bullet cartridges hitting the pavement hasn't turned you off to this build, then there is a real chance this build could be your next pseudo-homicidal favorite for at least an afternoon. Ironically, this build would possibly be even more fun in PvE. But that's for another video. 6 ghost faces out of 13 Michael Myers. This next build will be quick because it seems the rest of the community has been grifting our letters and beat us to the upload punch. Wishkeeper is the newest addition to the arsenal of bows that makes people who take PvP too seriously cry. If you haven't picked it up, you probably should, because even if you hate bows, this bow is quite enjoyable to use. The build runs our Wishkeeper with the Foe Tracers. Foe Tracers allows us to gain bonus weapon damage for weapons matching our subclasses whenever we tag an enemy with corresponding debuffs. This allows our Strand Dive on Hunter, our Shackle Grenade, and even the bow's own traps to become a one-way ticket to our opponent's obituary. If our goal was to get you to watch our videos, we could easily ramble on for another 3 minutes about the ins and outs of this build, but like I mentioned, many have already done that, so go watch their videos instead. Our real last build is an adaptation of a personal favorite of mine updated for the ever-power-creeping world, and designed to punish the bunched-up nincompoops that insist on holding hands and death-balling in checkmate. If you're a long-time fan, you will recognize this build as Warp Speed, and its basis is that we want to bend time and space around so much that we can wear it like a necklace. We accomplish this by running Blink Warlock with the Astrocyte Verse. This gives us access to the fastest free burst movement option in the game, allowing us to reposition on enemies so fast our kills often come from our enemies snapping their own necks to keep up. This we used to combine with the Mida multi-tool, but as sad and as painful as it is for me to say, Mida just can't keep up anymore. Talk about irony. Instead, we run the Graviton Lance. This not only makes mods cheaper because we can run Harmony mods, but it also gives us the free bonus of slapping around any rubbernecking, death-balling, teammate-fondling onlookers with a burst of damage. Perfect for checkmate. The rest of this build hasn't really altered much, as with all good off-meta builds, once you find it, it rarely gets nerfed because no one is using it. In fact, this build has received almost exclusively buffs over the staggering 4-year lifespan. We still run a shotgun with the aspects Child of the Old Gods and Feed the Void. For fragments, use Remnant, Vigilance, Leeching, and Exchange. This build has served my purposes like an absolute trooper over the years. And if you give it a go, I promise it will do you the same. Subscribe for more funny builds. Bless your faces, and deuces.